At my own birthday dinner, with the whole family sitting around the table, my father stood up to give a toast and said, "He's never once made me proud. Not really." The table laughed. Somebody's chair scraped. Someone said, "Come on, Walt," in that tone people use when they're not actually disagreeing with you, just noting that you said the quiet part loud. I didn't argue. I smiled, actually. Then I quietly picked up my phone, stepped outside, and called my bank to cancel something my father didn't even know I'd been carrying for the last 4 years. He found out 3 weeks later, in the worst possible way. This is that story. My name isn't important for this one. What matters is that I grew up in Fairview, Indiana, the quieter of 2 brothers, in a family where my older brother Todd was always the one people talked about at church potlucks, the confident one, the one with the big ideas, the one my father introduced first at every gathering. I was the one who stayed close to home, took a steady job in logistics, married young, and never had a story dramatic enough to make people lean in at Thanksgiving. That was fine by me. I never needed to be the exciting one. 4 years ago, my father's auto repair shop, the one he'd run on Route 9 for almost 30 years, nearly went under. Todd had talked him into expanding into a second location, co-signed a loan alongside him. And when the second shop failed within 18 months, the debt landed almost entirely on my parents' house. They took a second mortgage just to keep the original shop's doors open. Todd, for his part, moved on to his next big idea within the year and rarely brought up the shop again. I found out how bad things had actually gotten by accident, going through some paperwork at my mom's request. My parents were 2 months from a foreclosure notice. I called the bank myself, quietly, without telling my parents or my brother. I arranged to become an authorized third-party payer on their mortgage. Legal, on the books, but structured, so the bank's hardship correspondence went to my parents describing a modified payment plan, never mentioning that the difference between what they could afford and what they owed was coming out of my account every single month. I did that on purpose. I didn't want my father feeling like he owed me anything. I just wanted them to keep their house. For 4 years, nobody in that family knew. Todd got credit at every holiday for helping Dad through a rough patch, because he'd once bought him a new truck with a bonus from a sales job. I got nothing, because as far as anyone knew, I hadn't done anything. My birthday dinner was nothing extravagant. My parents' dining room, a store-bought cake, my wife, my brother and his fiancée, a couple of aunts. My father had had 2 glasses of wine by the time he stood up to give the toast, which in our family usually meant he was about to say something he thought was funnier than it was. "To my son," he started, raising his glass, looking mostly at Todd's fiancée and my aunts rather than at me. Now, he's never been the one to set the world on fire. Never made me proud the way some folks do. Not really, but he shows up, and I guess that counts for something. The table laughed. Not cruelly exactly. More like a room full of people who'd heard my father make comments like that for years and had simply stopped registering them as unkind. My aunt patted my hand and said, "Oh, he's just teasing," which is the thing people say when they'd rather not deal with whether he actually was. I want to be honest about what I felt. It wasn't rage. It was a very specific, very quiet kind of clarity. The kind where 4 years of silent effort suddenly weighs exactly as much as it's been treated. Like nothing. I smiled, thanked everyone for coming, ate my cake, and around 9 o'clock, I stepped out to the driveway for what I told my wife was some air. I called the bank's after-hours line from my parents' driveway, cake plate still balanced on the porch railing behind me. I confirmed my identity, gave the account number I'd had memorized for 4 years, and asked to be formally removed as the third-party authorized payer on my parents' mortgage account, effective the next billing cycle. The representative asked, standard procedure, whether I understood this would return the account to standard payment terms, meaning the full amount my parents' income had never actually been able to cover on its own. I understand, I said. I want to be clear about something, because I've thought about it a lot since. I wasn't trying to hurt my parents. If my father had called me that week and asked for help directly, honestly, I'd have kept paying without a second thought. I'd been doing it for 4 years without needing a thank you. What I couldn't keep doing quietly was funding a version of myself in that house that didn't exist to anyone but the bank. If I was going to be the one who never made him proud, I decided I wasn't going to also be the invisible reason the house stayed his. I drove home that night and didn't tell my wife what I'd done until we were in bed. She just nodded slowly and said, "It's about time." For 3 weeks, nothing happened because mortgage servicing doesn't move fast. I went back to my regular life, work, dinner with my wife, the ordinary rhythm of a person nobody expects a dramatic story out of. Then my mother called me on a Tuesday evening, her voice tight in a way I hadn't heard since the year of the near foreclosure. "We got a letter from the bank," she said. "They're saying our payment's going up almost $800 a month starting next cycle. Some kind of program ending? Your father's furious. He thinks it's a mistake." I didn't say anything right away. I let her keep talking because I already knew what came next. "He called the bank today to straighten it out," she said. And the woman on the phone mentioned something about an authorized third party being removed from the account. "Do you know anything about that?" I told her the truth, all 4 years of it, plainly, without drama. The near foreclosure, the quiet arrangement with the bank, the reason I never mentioned it. I told her I wasn't calling to be paid back, and I wasn't asking for an apology. I just didn't have it in me anymore to keep being invisible in the one place I'd actually shown up the most. My mother was quiet for a long time on the phone. Then she said, "Your father's going to want to talk to you." He did call 2 days later, and it wasn't really an apology. My father's never been a man who says the word directly. What he said was, "Your mother told me what you did, for 4 years." A long pause. I didn't know that. Another pause. I should have known that. I didn't go back to quietly covering the difference on their mortgage. Instead, my wife and I sat down with my parents at their kitchen table and worked out a plan they both actually knew about. A real one, on paper, with my name on it where everyone could see it, including Todd, who found out at that same table exactly how much of the rough patch he'd helped cause and exactly who had spent 4 years quietly cleaning it up without a single toast in his honor. My father hasn't given another toast like the one at my birthday dinner since. He's not a changed man overnight. I don't think people work that way. But he stopped introducing Todd first at family gatherings, and last month, at my nephew's christening, he introduced me as my son, who's carried more of this family than any of us realized, which is about as close to an apology as I expect I'll ever get from him. And honestly, it was enough. I didn't withdraw that support to punish anyone. I withdrew it because I finally understood that quietly protecting people who don't know they're being protected doesn't earn you their pride. It just makes it easier for them to keep underestimating you. If they were going to see me clearly, it was going to have to happen in the light, not in a bank's back-end paperwork. If you've ever carried something for your family quietly, expecting no credit, only to be dismissed by the very people you were protecting, you don't owe anyone invisible loyalty. Real appreciation can survive being seen. If it can't, that tells you something too. If this story hit close to home, Let me know in the comments. I read everyone. And if you want more stories about quiet people who finally stopped being invisible, subscribe, because this won't be the last family that had no idea what it actually cost to keep them together.